Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari. Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrikaracharya Ashtottara Shri Srimad Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrikaracharya Ashtottara Shri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavina Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Give me 1 second here. Okay, that's not the one. Wow. Okay, sorry about that. That's the one. No, it's not. That's it. Okay, sorry about that. Okay. On this 20th day of January, 2023 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Reading from the 6th canto, Prescribed Duties for Mankind, 4th chapter, the Hangsadhuya Prayers, text number 31. Yat Chaktayo Vadatam Vadinam Vai Vivara Samvara Bhuvo Bhavanti Kurvanti Chaisham Muhur Atmamoham Tasmai Namo Ananta Gunaya Bhumne Yat Shaktayo Vadatam Vadinam Vai Vivada Samvada Bhuvo Bhavanti Kurvanti Chaisham Muhuratma Moham Tasmai Namo Nanda Gunaya Bhumne Yat Shaktayo Vadatam Vadinam Vai Vivada Samvada Bhuvo Bhavanti Kurvanti Chaisham Muhuratma Moham Tasmai Namo Nanda Gunaya Bhumne Yak Shaktayo Vadatam Vadinam Vai Vivada Samvada Bhuvo Bhavanti Kurvanti Chaisham Muhuratma Moham Tasmai Namo Nanda Gunaya Bhumne Yak Shaktayo Vadatam Vadinam Vai Vivada Samvada Bhuvo Bhavanti Kurvanti Chaisham Muhuratma Moham Tasmai Namo Nanda Gunaya Bhumne Yak Shaktayo Vadatam Vadinam Vai Vivada Samvada Bhuvo Bhavanti Kurvanti Chaisham Muhuratma Moham Tasmai Namo Nanda Gunaya Bhumne Yak Shaktayo Vadatam Vadinam Vai Vivada Samvada Bhuvo Bhavanti Kurvanti Chaisham Muhuratma Moham Tasmai Namo Nanda Gunaya Bhumne Yat Shaktayo Vadatam Vadinam Vai Vivada Samvada Bhuvo Bhavanti Kurvanti Chaisham Muhuratma Moham Mai Namo Nanda Gunaya Bhumne Yat Shaktayo Vadatam Vadinam Vai Vivada Samvada Bhuvo Bhavanti Kurvanti Chaisham Muhuratma Moham Tasmai Namo Nanda Gunaya Bhumne. Can you do the curtains for me? Oh, okay. Yat Shaktayaha, whose multifarious potencies, Vadatam, speaking different philosophies, Vadinam, of the speakers, Vai, indeed, Vivada, of argument, Samvada, an agreement, Bhuvaha, the causes, Bhavanti, are, Kurvanti, create, Cha, and, Esham, of them, the theorists, Muhuhu, continuously, Atmamoham, bewildering regarding the existence of the soul, bewilderment regarding the existence of the soul. Tasmai, unto him, Namaha, my respectful obeisances, Ananta, unlimited, Gunaya, possessing transcendental attributes, Bhumne, the all-pervading Godhead. Translation. Still Daksha, praying. Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto the all-pervading Supreme Personality of Godhead, who possesses unlimited transcendental qualities, acting from within the cores of the hearts of all philosophers who propagate various views. He causes them to forget their own souls while sometimes agreeing and sometimes disagreeing among themselves. Thus he creates within this material world a situation in which they are unable to come to a conclusion. I offer my obeisances unto him. Purport. Since time immemorial, or since the creation of the cosmic manifestation, the conditioned souls have formed various parties of philosophical speculation. But this is not true of the devotees. Non-devotees have different ideas of creation, maintenance, and annihilation, and therefore they are called vadis and prativadis, proponents and counter-proponents. It is understood from the statement of the Mahabharata that there are many munis or speculators. Tarko patishta shruteyo vibhinna nasa vrishir yasya matang nabhinnam. All speculators must disagree with other speculators. Otherwise, why should there be so many opposing parties concerned with ascertaining the supreme cause? Philosophy means finding the ultimate cause. As the Vedanta Sutra very reasonably says, Atato Brahma Jigyasa. Human life is meant for understanding the ultimate cause. Devotees accept the ultimate cause. Devotees accept that the ultimate cause is Krishna because this conclusion is supported by all Vedic literature and also by Krishna himself, who says, ahaṁ sarvasya prabhavaḥ. I am the source of everything. Devotees have no problem understanding the ultimate cause of everything, but non-devotees must face many opposing elements because everyone who wants to be a prominent philosopher invents his own way. In India, there are many parties of philosophers such as the Dvaitavadis, the Advaitavadis, Vaisheshikas, Mimamsakas, Mayavadis, and Swabhavavadis, and each of them oppose the others. Similarly, in the Western countries, there are also many philosophers with different views of creation, life, maintenance, and annihilation. Thus, it is undoubtedly a fact that there are countless philosophers throughout the world, each of them contradicting the others. Now, one might ask why there are so many philosophers if the ultimate goal of philosophy is one. Undoubtedly, the ultimate cause is one, the Supreme Brahman. As Arjuna told Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita 10:12, Param Brahma Param Dhamma Pavitram Paramam Bhavan Purusham Shasvatam Divyam Adidevam Vibhum. You are the Supreme Brahman, the ultimate, the supreme abode and purifier, the absolute truth and the eternal divine person. You are the primal God, transcendental and original, and you are the unborn and all-pervading beauty. Close quote. Non-devotee speculators, however, do not accept an ultimate cause, sarva karana karanam. Because they are ignorant and bewildered concerning the soul and its activities, even though some of them have a vague idea of the soul, many controversies arise, and the philosophical speculators can never reach a conclusion. All of these speculators are envious of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 16:19-20, Tanaham dushatakruran samsareshu naradaman chapamya jatsam ashubhan asuri sheva yonishu asurim yonam apanna mudha janmani janmani mama prapyaiva kunteya tato adamam gatim. Those who are envious and mischievous, who are the lowest among men, are cast by me into the ocean of material existence, into various demoniac species of life. Attaining repeated birth among the species of demoniac life, such persons can never approach me. Gradually they sink down to the most abominable type of existence. Because of their envy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, non-devotees are born in demoniac families life after life. They are great offenders, and because of their offenses, the Supreme Lord keeps them always bewildered. Kurvanti chaisham muhuratma moham. The Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, purposely keeps them in darkness, atma moham. The great authority, Parashara, the father of Vyasadeva, explains the Supreme Personality of Godhead thus. Jnana Shakti Balaishwarya Viryate Jang Sasheshataha Bhagavat Shabda Vachyani Vinaheyar Gunadibihi. The demoniac speculators cannot understand the transcendental qualities, form, pastimes, strength, knowledge, and opulence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which are all free from material contamination. Vinaheyar Gunadibihi. These speculators are envious of the existence of the Lord, Jagadahu and Ishvara. Their conclusion is that the entire cosmic manifestation has no controller but is just working naturally. Thus they are kept in constant darkness, birth after birth, and cannot understand the real cause of all causes. This is the reason why there are so many schools of philosophical speculation. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. Hare Krishna. So this is a fairly well-known verse, although it's not quoted so often, but it's a favorite of the devotees. And it's describing how Krishna himself creates a situation where different philosophers and proponents of different views on how the earth and how the creation came to be are inspired to fight against each other, never come to a conclusion. Vadatam vadinam vai vivada samvada bhavo bhavanti. And of course, the natural verse for this, which Prabhupada cites in the purport, Tarko Patishta Shuddhiyo Vibhinna, which is a really important verse for us from the Mahabharata. Tarko Apatishta Shuddhiyo Vibhinna Nasa Vrishir Yasamatam Nabhinnam Dharma Sitattam Nihitam Guhayam Mahajano Yena Gatasapanta. So what the verse starts out exactly as this verse does, Tarko Apatishta, by Tarka, meaning material argument and debate, you can never come to a conclusion because it has no standing in the absolute truth. It's someone's mental speculation, and the mind and the intelligence is always affected by various varieties of the modes of nature. And so there's always some disagreement and on forever. So Tarko Patishta, and even the Shrutis, if you just study the Vedas on your own, Vedas and the Puranas and the Upanishads and everything, then they also seem to contradict some, by our material intelligence. I remember, the magic of the internet. I was listening to a class, I forget who was giving the class, but it was some time ago. And there was a reference to the Rig Veda, which I'd never read. And how the Rig Veda is filled with all kinds of prayers and demigods and this and that, sun god. And so what did I do? I downloaded the Rig Veda from the internet. I just Googled it, and there was the Rig Veda. So I started looking at it. And sure enough, the first one was this prayer to the fire god. And the next one was a prayer to Indra. And it's all ultimately materially motivated. We pray to Indra so you can go to Indra Loka. We pray to the fire god so you can get free of sins, whatever, And I can see, if you get involved in these prayers, as Krishna says in the second chapter, Yamimam pushpitam vacham prabhadantya vipashyada Veda vara rata pata nanjarasti divarana. This word Veda vara rata, this rata is a kind of an idiom in Sanskrit. And it means supposed or apparent followers of the Vedas, knowers of the Vedas, the reciters of the Vedas. They say they're attracted by the flowery words of the Vedas, describing Nandana and the heavenly planets and all these things. And they say there's nothing more than this, that this is what the Vedas are all about. And these are vadis. You know, we have Mayavadis and all different. Vadis means they're speaking. You know, they're proponents of certain philosophy. And they can be very influential. They can have a great following, and they can write so many books and speak very nicely. And so in this way, especially in Kali Yuga, so many thousands and millions of people are misguided about the ultimate goal of life and how to achieve it. Because they're confident that they're following someone who knows what they're doing. So this is the age of confusion. And what is that verse? Prayena paishak sabya kalavasman yugadina manda sumanda matayo manda bhagya yupadvita. Kali Yuga has so many faults and so many drawbacks for those who may even aspire for some self-realization or whatever. First is you don't live that long. For the most part. This word prayen, for the most part. And if you do live a long time, it's like what, 100, some lady just died, she was known to be the oldest person, 118. Big deal, you know. I mean, just you go back one yuga, and they're living for 1,000 years. Another one, 10,000, another 100,000. They're like Valmiki. He was a thief, right? He was like a low caste, but he got the mercy of who? Vyasadeva or someone. And so he started chanting, and he lived for 100,000 years. So he was able to chant and realize Lord Ram. He was chanting Ram, 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 Ram. You know how they tricked him to chanting? You know, he said, "I'm not going to chant the name of God." You know, all right, look, we know where you're at. Just chant death, okay? Mara, 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 Mara. So he started chanting Mara, 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 Mara. Before long, he's chanting Rama, 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 Rama. And then purified. So anyway, this age, you don't live very long. Most people are lazy in the matter of self-realization. You know, the movement has been growing, wonderfully since Prabhupada, started and so forth. And we have, 100,000 initiated devotees now, maybe. I think it's quite possible. But what's that? I mean, there's 8 billion people on the planet. And there's all, troves of people who haven't even heard of us. I mean, don't you go out and sometimes you meet people and they say, "Who are you guys? Never heard of you." What? You never heard of us? We've been around for 50 years, 60 years. But people's minds, they're just tuned into certain channels of information. And that's what they consider to be real. So this is, they're lazy in the matter of, and even if someone is interested, sumanda matayo, they become misguided. There's so many cheaters out there who are ready to exploit people's desire for realization or God, whatever, and make a big business out of it, and they become their followers, and they're just led off a cliff, astray. And so therefore, it's unfortunate, generally manda bhagya, and always disturbed by so many things. Like there was the pandemic, was usually disturbing. And it's left a lot of people neurotic and scarred by it. All that isolation at home, I mean, a guy goes to work and comes back, wife maybe taking care of the kid, Now he's got to work from home, so they have to deal with him, and he has to deal with them, and they maybe have a 2-room apartment, so you can imagine how stressful it is. So this is the age of Kali, and it's not favorable for yoga, contemplation, all of these things, So how can we be confident that we're following the proper thing? Well, Krishna, realizing this, he comes as Lord Chaitanya, and he gives this process that begins and really ends, but begins certainly with the chanting of the holy name. If you don't know anything else, if you just wander into the temple and you take part in the chanting, your life has just taken a huge step forward. And auspiciousness, right? You've heard the holy name, seen the deities. You may not do much else, but you're in the atmosphere. And if the temple is enlivening and it's clean and the prasadam is nice, and we had a fellow walk into the Gita class on Wednesday, and he sat down and he never stopped smiling, basically. You know, I was just giving, I said, have you been experiencing? No, it's the first time I've ever been in a Hare Krishna temple. What's your name? Baba? Okay. And I think I'll be back, you know. Just a fortunate soul. I was just reading Bhagavad Gita, basically, you know, my regular thing. So, this is so Tarkopatisha Shruti Overbinda, back to that word, because it comes to a very important point in instruction. The Shrutis themselves, by different interpretations, they seem to differ. Ultimately, they agree, but that's, you know, you have to know how to interpret them. And Nasa Rishi, and if you want to be a rishi, you have to differ from other rishis. Just like the history of Western philosophy. It's always that one philosopher comes along and then the next one, he adds to it, transforms it, disagrees, and they go on, you know, like that. And they never come to a conclusion. What's the final conclusion? What should I do, you know? I remember when I was a kid, meaning about 18, 19, I dropped out of school and I got a simple job, you know, for a while. But then I said, what am I wasting my life? So I went back to school in NYU. I was living with my parents in Hempstead. And I started going to New York University. And I wanted to study philosophy. I was looking for some reasonable basis for morality, you know, because the Vietnam War was on and everything. So ironically, the teacher was an Indian guy who had become completely westernized and was teaching Western philosophy, Socratic philosophy. We started with the ancient Greeks like that, you know. And there's some hints there, like Prabhupada, he really liked Socrates, you know, because Socrates is famous for corrupting the youth of Greece, right, with the Socratic method, asking about the soul and things, you know. And so the elders didn't like that, and they arrested him, and they said, well, we're going to execute you. You know, you have to drink hemlock. So he just laughed it off. He said, you can execute me if you can find me, if you can catch me. You know, indicating that he knew he wasn't the body, that they really couldn't kill him. And Prabhupada really, he would quote that sometimes, you know. So, but then other philosophers come along, and there's a whole string of them, and, you know, and really what's the absolute truth? You can never find it. So that's the nature, and there's also Eastern philosophers. The Prabhupada is listing some of these, the Mimamsakas. You remember the Govardhan Leela, how it starts? How Krishna is adopting karma mimamsa, which because everyone, it was like a traditional thing. They worshipped Indra, so they get the rain, so that the farmers, it's a natural thing. And it was Krishna was asking him, Father, what is this sacrifice? What's it all about? So he started saying, oh, you don't have to worry about that. I mean, karma is all-powerful. If you just do the right thing, then the gods have to give you everything. You don't have to worship anybody. It's all just a big machine. In other words, you just do your duties in your varna nicely, and you be a moral person, and then prosperity will come. The gods are just agents of your karma. They don't have any independent, thing. You have to worship them like that. So that was it. That he won the argument, and so they said, "Okay, we'll give it. What do you want us to do? Okay, you just worship Govardhan and the cows. That's the real source of our prosperity, right?" So you know the story. They had a beautiful worship, annakut, huge cooking. Everyone was fed, from the Brahmins down to the dogs, and then everyone went home happy until the next day when Indra was very, very insulted, And you know the story. So that's one kind of philosophy. And in the East also, in India, there's all these, we know about Mayavad, right? Mayavad is a powerful philosophy. There's still many proponents today. So what this verse is saying is that the power, it's just like if you want to rebel against Krishna, well, Krishna gives us that ability. That's a part of our minute independence. So therefore, then, the whole material world is created to accommodate those who don't want to be devotees anymore. It's not that they're condemned eternally, but they're allowed to go to try to enjoy separately until they get frustrated again and again, and then one of Krishna's representatives, or maybe Krishna himself, they'll get the good fortune to associate with it and get the seed of devotional service and get turned back toward Godhead. That's the program. So one of the main ways in which we stay conditioned is by coming under the sway of these false philosophies. This is why Srila Prabhupada, one of his main missions, was fighting against Mayavad. You hear the early lectures or many of the purports in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, which was begun in India, by the way. He started serializing the Chaitanya Charitamrita in his Back to Godhead. That was his only vehicle of publishing at first. So you'll see there's one or two verses with his commentary, one or two verses in commentary. But he couldn't publish it so much, and so there's only a limited number from the Adi Leela. But when the seventh he had translated some chapters, he had us publish, and I was there at the time. I had just started working at the press to publish the seventh chapter of the Adi Leela first. The Lord in Five Features or something was called. That was about the Panchatattva. But there's a big section where Lord Chaitanya is in Benares, and he gets to convert Prakashananda Saraswati, who's a huge Mayavadi. He had thousands of disciples, and Benares is the home of the Mayavadis. And Lord Chaitanya went there, and he was just dancing and chanting in the street, ecstatically, and he was getting all this ridicule from the Mayavadis. He had actually taken sannyas. This was the only sannyas available in the Mayavad line. I don't know if you know that. Because sannyas wasn't a thing in Vaishnavism. If you want to renounce, you take Babaji and you go to Vrindavan. And like that. So it was actually Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati who really popularized it within Gaudiya Vaishnavism because of preaching. Because the sannyasi is meant to go and travel and preach. The Babajis, they just do bhajan, So anyway, Lord Chaitanya is there, and one of his Kashi Mishra, and Chandrasekhar. There were two Chandrasekhars. I think this was the second one, and they were sent there actually because he knew he would go and he needed a place to stay with devotees. So he's staying with them, but they're hearing all of this blasphemy and they're very unhappy, and so they tell him about it. And so he accepted an invitation, which he otherwise wouldn't have done, so he could go and convert all the Mayavadis. So he goes there, and it's always very brilliant. First thing he does, he sits down, takes a very humble position. He sits down where everyone washes their feet, which is kind of a dirty place. So he's sitting down there. But then he shows his effulgence, and the Mayavadis, oh, this is Narayan. They were right, it actually is Narayan. So in that way, he got their attention, and they, please, Prabhu, come over and sit with us, And then they put their case. So you're, initiated, you're one of us. Why are you doing this sentimental business of chanting and dancing, So he said, what should I say? It couldn't have been true, but it was a white lie. So, no, my spiritual master Ishwar Puri told me that I wasn't qualified to study Vedanta. He's my Pandit, he was brilliant. And that you should just chant the Hare Krishna mantra. And he cited the famous verse, we should all know by now, it's the easiest one to learn. Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Nama eva kevalam, kalo nasteva, nasteva, nasteva gataranyata. If you want to achieve the supreme goal of life in this age when dissension and chaos abound, there is no other way, there is no other way, there is no other way that can ever be found. But to chant Krishna's name, but to chant Krishna's name, but to chant Krishna's name with a stout-hearted vow, and to pray, O Lord Krishna, O friend of the poor, let my head ever unto your lotus feet bow. So that second part is a little extra. But the idea is that there's no other way but chanting the holy name. So you just chant Hare Krishna, and everything will come. So after chanting a little bit, I became kind of mad, I had all these, I didn't know what was going on. So I went back to him and said, what kind of mantra have you given me to me? So he congratulated me. Oh, thank you very much. For attaining this ecstatic state by chanting. And then he told him a verse that Lord Chaitanya said, Ishwar Puri said, is the main verse in the whole Bhagavatam. You may not know this verse. It's in the 11th canto. Evam bhataksva priya namakirtya jata anuraga dudachitta uchay hasat chato roti dirauti gaya chunmaravan vidlokya kibaya. It's all a verse about chanting and going into ecstasy. One who has taken a vow to chant the holy name, which is very dear to him, the holy name of Krishna. Priya nama kircha jata, then it generates anurag, means attraction for Krishna. Druta chitta uchai, one's consciousness, heart melts, and when it laughs and dances and falls down and cries, he's describing all the ecstatic symptoms, So I did that, and that's what I got. So that's why I do it, So then they tried to, talk to him about the Vedanta Sutras, and he said, well, I can say something on the Vedanta Sutra. Would you like to hear it? He said, yes. Because by now, he was effulgent, he's Narayan. So he gave them the actual commentary, the conclusion of Vedanta Sutra, which is, after all, the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is devotional service. And they were all very impressed, and they were all converted, which is, thousands and thousands. It's very nice. So the idea is that these bodies, these adherents of various philosophies, it's kind of, they can only do that because of Krishna's Shakti. Just like he gives us the opportunity to forget him if we want to, to have some sense gratification. But there's always a reaction to it, right? We never really get happy by the sense gratification. You burn out your senses, and your what do they call it? My soulmate has left me. What's going on? And so, the sense gratification, as Krishna says, I'm not going to quote the verse, but I'll just give you the meaning. The pleasures that come from the senses are inevitably sources of misery. If nothing else, you lead an ideal life and it's all very nice and you die peacefully in your bed, then you got to come back. And because you had no assets in devotional service, you committed so many sins, especially in this age, even unknowingly, and all kinds of suffering. And just to be born again and then get old. So the basic bottom line is, in the Vedic culture, the mission of human life is to get free from the round of birth and death. I heard Prabhupada talk about this, tato brahma jigyasa, and then, liberation. Now, devotees know, that's preliminary. We know that if we practice devotional service, liberation will come automatically. And we don't, But it's a very important impetus in the conditioned state to be very sober-minded about birth, old age, disease, and death. And that's why Krishna says, Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadi, Dukkha, Doshana, Darshanam. This is one of the 20, I think it is, elements of knowledge for a sincere seeker of, Krishna consciousness. Beginning with amanitvam, adambitvam, humility. And adambitvam means lack of pretentious pride in one's knowledge and whatever. The pretense is part of it too. Is that you pretend to be religious, you pretend to be moral, but it's all simply a grift. You know what a grift is? It's so that you can cash in on it somehow. Your real motive is self-centered. It's not, doing good for others or whatever. There's always that element of it. I mean, there are sincere people, but because the modes of nature there, it doesn't work. So what's the solution? The idea is that all of this is under Krishna's control, this misguidance of all of the different philosophies going on. But there is available genuine devotees who are going to give you the real truth, the real essence of the Vedas, which is Bhagavat philosophy. That's why at the beginning of Bhagavatam, the first verse is all about the subject matter. The Supreme Personality of Godhead who created everything, who enlightened Brahma, who is, existing since time immemorial, like that, the source of everything. But the next verse is about the Bhagavatam itself. Dharmak projatakaita vota padamoni matsaranam satam vejam. That thought ends on the word vejam. So it says, first of all the cheating dharmas are kicked out right here. There's no mincing of words, There's all kinds of things that look like real dharma, but they actually take you astray. Is that dharma is not meant, we learned that in the second chapter, dharma is not meant for artha, to make money so you can enjoy your senses. People think it is. This is what they call it now, prosperity theology. If you really, it's a big scam. They have mailing lists. They send you a big letter. You send back this prayer cloth or something. It's really a printed thing, and we'll pray for you. And we have this. This lady did that, and she got. She won the lottery or something. It's just like, And people send it in with your, if $10 gift or 20 or 30 or 100, whatever it is, And people, they're ignorant. They do it, They grew up in Christian families. This is what's going on. So it's all a question, and if you do it right, then you'll be prosperous, But that's not what Dharma is meant for. That's a scam, right? That's right. That's Dharma project, the kite the bow. That's a cheating Dharma, kicked out, not just ignored, but kicked out in this Bhagavatam. And what is Dharma for then? Dharma isn't even for liberation ultimately. Well, it says that's preliminary. I'm sorry. In the verses there, it'll say. What does it say? Kamasinendriyapirti labo jivati yavata jivasa tatviti narto yashteya karmabhi. That really, your Dharma is not meant for artists so you can enjoy kama. One should live as simply as possible, keeping body and soul together, and inquire into the Absolute. We're right back to the Vedanta Sutra. Vedanta Sutra, in its essence, is giving us, very terse instructions that are then expanded and explained in the Bhagavatam. Bhagavatam is a natural commentary. So you find much of the same language. Tatra jigyasa, and this is atato brahma jigyasa. And so what's the final goal? So the soul can be completely satisfied. That is real Dharma, which engenders pure devotion to Krishna. Now if we come across a Bhagavat who embodies the essence of the Bhagavatam, who can attract our attention, and the key word, I wanted to mention this from the beginning of the Bhagavatam, second verse. What does it say there? It says, Dharma projit kaita vod shabadamoni matsaranam satam vejam. It's understood by those who are not envious, those who are receptive. Matsaranam satam vejam vastava matta vastu shivadam tapatayon mulanam. They give vastava vastu, the real ground of being. There's this philosophers in the West with the real essence of things, where it really lies. Vastava vastu. Shivadam brings all good fortune, uproots the threefold miseries. Srimad Bhagavate, what is it? Mahamanikutte, thank you. Mahamanikutte King Vapararishvara Sadhya. So this was the Srimad Bhagavatam was the last work by Mahamuni Vyasadeva in his maturity, and it's described how that came to be. It was a very conclusive work. King Vaparai, what's the need of any others? Because if one submissively hears Shushushayas and meditates on the Lord through this, and just hears this Bhagavatam, the Lord will be compacted in his heart. In other words, the Bhagavatam gives you the reasons why you should worship Krishna, and it's the very means of success. You just hear the Bhagavatam submissively, and you'll advance in devotional service. So it's a great gift. But unless it's presented by a devotee and given, then Prabhupada really rails against these Bhagavat reciters. It's a perfect gift. Come and this Baba will give the Bhagavatam readings, and people come by the thousands. And what do they hear? Rasa dance. That's what they're doing. Oh, the rasa dance. I'm hearing the Bhagavatam. But that's not going to help you. You got to have all the philosophy that leads up to that. The first canto, second canto, all of it. We're in the sixth canto now. Very important instructions are there. So when you have the person Bhagavat preaching and living the Bhagavatam itself, then you have a great treasure. And that's why Prabhupada was so potent, and he could create devotees everywhere. Because the genuineness of it, and the process when the holy name is given and taught by such a person, then you get the full benefit of the chanting. Otherwise, what's it compared to? Milk? Touched by the lips of a serpent. And that's also dangerous now. Kirtans, sounds the same, but it's not. Because it's not sung by devotees. So this is why we're so fortunate we can escape this, because this is Krishna's power too, to get into some philosophy, grab onto it, and associate with others, and then think, yes, this is the truth. And you start preaching that, you convince yourself, and you're completely in the dark. I mean, all these Mayavadis, they're really victims. They're victims of the Mayavad philosophy. There's a whole reason why that was done. I won't get into it now. To conquer over the influence of Buddhism and bring back the authority of the Vedas. But then we required Ramanuja and Madhvacharya and Lord Chaitanya to refute the Mayavadis and said that this is the real essence of the Vedas, is pure bhakti. That's the end message of it, as is taught in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So it's that's the battle why Srila Prabhupada was always fighting against the Mayavadis, and it's a glorious fight. And Prabhupada explains the pratibhadis and the bodies and the proponents, and it goes on. And so then the Tarkopatishtha verse, just to end on that, and that is that it's the same theme. Tarkopatishtha Shruti over Binna, the Shrutis also seem to differ if you don't get the right teacher. And the Rishis also definitely differ in their opinions. So how are we going to know what real Dharma is? Dharma itatam nihitam guhayam mahajano yenagata sapanta. The essence of Dharma is hidden in the hearts of the realized souls, the Mahatmas, the devotees. And therefore, Mahajano yenagata sapanta, that the great souls, the Mahajans, and that includes the famous 12, and those who are following the 12 carefully, that gives you the gata, that'll give you the path by which you can navigate through this dangerous ocean full of all fake philosophies and misguiders who will let you astray. So we've been very fortunate to get the association and the books of a real Mahajan who's following the Mahajans perfectly, and that can give us the means and the faith and the confidence and the information by which we can actually go to the goal, gata, to go to the goal. So we're very fortunate. Yes, questions?
Thank you. That was a wonderful class. You
Hare Krishna,
filled in the
Prabhupada.
blanks of a lot of questions I had, kind of connecting the overall philosophy and how we're doing something that's so bona fide. I had a couple just quick. Well, the first question is: do you know the ethnicity of the lady that lived 118 years old? Do you know where she came from? What part of the world? She's from Seattle? Oh, I get it now.
No, I don't think so. I think she was from foreign land somewhere. I forget.
They seem to be from Japan quite often and Italy. That's why I was asking, is there something about those diets that really do well? But okay. One thing about when the idea of some people still don't know who we are. We went to the Martin Luther King parade on Monday, and it was nice, very nice. And so you park at the end, and then you run past the crowd to meet up with the Jagannath cart and then come back. So I'm with the devotees, and we're running past the crowd, we're dressed like we're dressed, running past the crowd.
I went to a couple of those way back when they first started.
So we got the whole spectrum of reactions to like these, strangely dressed people with the various colors running by them. And some would go, "Oh, you're monks," or some would say Hare Krishna. But the one in Amoga will love this. We had a really good reaction where this guy in the corner saw us, looked at us, and goes, "You guys got to stop taking that acid." And Momoka goes, but he goes, "That guy's dressed like the Mad Hatter, though." So it was a guy who was really crazily dressed telling us to stop taking that acid. So I thought that was pretty funny. We drove up yesterday. Radheshyam Prabhu gave Bhagavatam class in L.A. And Vrajaraj, that's a Shiksha guru of his, he was in the student ashram in India. We had him. So he was giving some reflections on the way home. And it brought up this idea that you brought up today that brings up my question about Mayavads were doing the sannyas early. Yeah. And so then it was, because I was like, well, so is Radheshyam a sannyasi? He's like, no, but he lives basically like a sannyasi. But why doesn't he take sannyas? Well, because he'd have to give up his position as temple president in Pune because he'd be traveling so much. Then that brought up this idea that there's two types of sannyasis. He said, Kshetra sannyas, who stays in one place, and he forgot the word of the other sannyas. That's the traveling sannyasi. So
the Paravajakacharya.
So is there anything you can say about, since I didn't know sannyas was so new, our style of sannyasi is like 100 years new then, with Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada established it? Yes. So do we focus on those two types of sannyasis, and can you talk about the distinction of them? And Prabhupada was obviously the traveling type.
Well, the Kshetra sannyas is there. Actually, Prabhupada encouraged one of his sannyasis to be who was the president of Vrindavan. He took on the role. I forget his name right now. And he mentioned that you can take Kshetra sannyas here. Unfortunately, he didn't last all that long. But it's not really something that ISKCON sannyasis really do very much. because there's so much need for, I mean, even if you're, oftentimes they become leaders of a zone. Many of the GBC are sannyasis. And they have to go, just like, Maharaj would be going to much more if his health allowed, but he sends some of his emissaries to go to Tucson and go to Boise, Hawaii now. He went there once, but so that's really the general profile of a sannyasi. There's even to say, well, the real sannyasis, they don't stay in any place more than 3 days, right? Prabhupada, he would do that kind of, because he was traveling all over the world. And he would sometimes stay more than 3 days, but it was always understood he was not going to stay here for months and months. He could, maybe a week at most, So that's one of the advantages, and one of the advantages of that, you don't get attached to any place, because that's what a big attachment is. You get attached to a place and the certain comforts and things, you tend to get. But if you're a sannyasi, it's a big austerity. You're always depending on others, and the biggest austerity for me, if I took sannyas, would be the diet, because they always love to cook for you, And I remember I went to a Rath Yatra once in Toronto. I used to go every year. And Jayapataka Maharaj had a lot of disciples there, as he has many places. And he was there that year. And he had these huge wampers. Did you ever see that? He would play these enormous wampers. Some was like a, huh?
We're thinking about getting some of those. Give this to
I'm not going to say anything. And so then it came time for lunch, and I was invited, godbrothers, so all the godbrothers sit down, and nice table, and then so it was a very opulent lunch, and I ate a little of everything, But then there was a huge lineup of his lady disciples who were living in Toronto, and they all had, carrying some dishes, and and that's part of this. He can't say, no, I don't want anything, I'm full, So he's going to take a little of everything, a little of everything. So, whoa, I'm done, Hare Krishna, and I got up and left. So that could be a big austerity. But sannyas is meant for preaching, it enables, and that's why Bhaktisiddhanta did it. Because there's a certain, especially in India, there's respect, just to have the sannyasi, so they're ready to listen to you. And Bhaktisiddhanta was going to give him the straight sauce. There's so many fake sannyasis who are just put on the dress to get support, That's, so he set the standard, and Prabhupada also, kept it for his sannyasis.
When I began, I was thanking you for filling in the blanks. You gave me a very satisfactory answer to something that I've been inquiring about a lot, and it was, we see in our lineage of the acharyas that these Babajis, and then we see, with Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada, and then his Thakur, and then his Prabhupada, they're very dressed nicely. They're not Babajis. They're dressed nice traveling preachers. Yeah. I was always wondering, about the Babaji part, and now you said that they didn't have a sannyas option, so they would go to Vrindavan and then just do their bhajan all the time. So what the real high renunciants would do, and that's what, of course, Gorkishodas Babaji did for many years. He just traveled around Vrindavan. But the interesting thing, he came to Navadvip specifically to get the association of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, because he was so learned and so pure, and he's known as the seventh sannyasi, seventh Goswami. Even though he was a householder, to the very end, he took Babaji at the end for a few years. He retired. I don't know if you know that. Didn't go to Vrindavan, but he was, aloof. But his discourse, his devotion, his learning was so great, and that Gorkishore wanted to have that association. So he came and he stayed. So it's a glorious line, and that's really our refuge. If we really study their lives and read the books of Srila Prabhupada, and it means that, and then when they're teaching the same thing that's in the books and the Bhagavatam, then this is the ground of our faith, is the words of the Acharya, and it's known as Amnaya. The words of the Shastra as received through bona fide line of disciplic succession. That is Amnaya, which should be the source of our pramana. But pramana means what you trust as a guide to your life. And Krishna says at the end, and I'll just end with this,
the last 4 verses of the 16th chapter, because there was some echoes of that in here. And he says he's talking about the demons who he's casting down into lower species in the hellish condition of life. So he says, Tribadang nadakassedam dvaram nashanam atmanha kama krodas tata lobas tasmarita trayam tijait. Says there are 3 gates leading to this hell that he described in previous verses. Lust, anger, and greed. The wise man gives these up, And what's the result of giving them up? Etaiva mukta konteya tamo dvarais tibiyanaha achayat yatmana kreyas tato yati param gatim. So this is the teaching by great contrast. Those who can give up or escape these 3 gates, lust, anger, and greed. Etaiva mukta konteya tamo dvarais, the door to darkness, to hell. 3 doors. He acts only for his ultimate good, for the soul. Atmana shreyas. And then tato yati param gatim. Ultimately he goes back to the supreme goal, the spiritual world. But he doesn't end the chapter on that. Then he says, Yakshastra vidnamutsurja vartate kamakaradaha nasa siddhim abapnoti nasukam na param gatim. Now here he brings the Shastra in, because that's where we get the instruction. Those who give up the vidhis, the instructions of Shastra, and continue to act just on their own whims, by kama, they don't never attain perfection, nor happiness, nor the supreme goal. So here's our choice. In the last verse, he brings it all home. Yak Shastra Tasmat Shastra Pramanam Te. There's that word pramana, evidence. Tasmat Shastra Pramanam Te, Karya Vavastato. Gatva Shastra Vedanoktam Karma Kartam Mahardasi. Therefore, we should take as evidence, as authority, what we should do and what we should refrain from doing in life. And that's really our whole life. We do one thing and not another. This is what sadhana is. We choose to do the right thing according to Shastra and Guru. So, Tasmat Shastra Pramanam Te, Karya Bhastato. One should accept Shastra as the final pramana. And then, understanding what the Shastra says, we should actually act according to the Shastra as a matter of duty. Which implies that we're not going to be spontaneously attracted, because it's going to tell us to give up things that we're attached to, and to do things that we don't like. But we do it anyway, because our high intelligence has been awoken, and we know that this is for my ultimate good. I'll go back to Godhead, beyond, and I'll be immersed in an ocean of bliss. So with that kind of faith, then you take on the austerities of the Shastra, and before long, chant 16 rounds if you're able to do it. Well, I feel much better. I'm not depressed anymore, Yeah, let me keep going, So that's the wonderful thing about this practice, is that it very quickly gives you some realization to deepen your faith so that you become determined to go. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Hari Bol. Uh-oh, I ignored my Zoom.
And I have a question.
Oh, okay.
No, Prabhu, but you ended the class already. Please.
Can you hold it
time.
for tomorrow? Or?
Yes, of course, tomorrow.
Okay, sorry, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
No problem.
I went over time. Oh, Krishna. Did I tell you, Moga, that when I first read that 16th chapter, I wasn't practicing anything. It got me down. That's pretty much what I'm like.
But mentioned that he read that chapter, and then he always kind of thought it was, he didn't think it was like an exaggeration.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hi, Bol, Dhanamai.
One very nice class, Prabhu, as usual. Prabhu, you mentioned about 11th canto's verse, which is very important. If you remember the number.
I think I got it right here. 11th canto, 2nd chapter, 40th verse. 11.2.40. Okay?
40. Thank you so much.
You can thank Moga for that. He's got it memorized.
Thank you. Haribol.